So this is a theater that we're in right now. What do you guys use this for? What's the story behind this location?
For this theater, we use this for everything. So when sometimes we have guest speakers come in here for large presentations, sometimes presentations about process, sometimes for presentations about creative that's going on. I think the studio, I mean, this particular room is used for anything and everything. I've been in here for everything from, hey, how do we want to fix our role descriptions to, hey, we have this wonderful speaker coming in that's a great graphic designer named Bethany Heck, who's going to talk to all the graphic designers at the studio about, what her process is.
Gotcha. So. Cool. Well, I am joined right now by Laura DeYoung, who is the head of art for Riot Games, but also the art director for League of Legends. You have two titles.
I do.
So how does that work?
So how that works is primarily I'm focused on League of Legends. So League of Legends, it's like quality consistency of the art, making sure we have the right artists working on the right products, right? Just like sort of matching them up with different features. So that's primarily what I'm doing. But head of art, that is thinking about again, quality, meaning like quality, talent, and culture worldwide at Riot. And the way I manage to do both of those things at the same time is that most of my time, as I said, is dedicated to the league, but I work with other art leaders and art directors, sort of as a work group.
So can you give me an example? Like, can you give me an example of, because everyone will think, well, isn't that the same thing? Like you guys come out with a skin and you need art for that skin, but when you're working with other like leaders across in different areas of the world, what is an example of a project like that?
So I don't really have an example of a project like that because that would apply more to, and I've only just started doing this, like other art leaders on other teams would be helping think about where the art department needs to go for the future.
Okay.
Decisions for League of Legends and what we want to do with the art in League of Legends happens on the League of Legends team with the art leads and the artists that are there.
Okay, so future games, unannounced projects, that type of thing,
Yeah.
you're kind of helping to work around with that. How did you end up getting into all this stuff? Have you always worked in the video game industry, or kind of how did you get your start?
No, I started out working in interactive. So, so at the time when I graduated from college, I was doing graphic design, interactive graphic design, and I love video games. But I thought, because the World Wide Web was all new. Mm-hmm. So to give you an idea of like how long ago we're talking, in the 90s, I worked on the first Nike.com. Like Nike didn't have a website.
Oh, nice. Okay.
They called us one day and they said, "Oh, there's this interwebs thing, and we think we should be on it." So I thought that all the game industry was just going to be there. Like in the next 5 years, all the games were going to be this interactive creature that lived on the web. And as things progressed and as the .com bust happened, it dawned on me that that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. So I very quickly wanted to switch directly into the games industry. So that happened, I guess, like 14 years ago, I switched to the games industry.
Where did you end up landing for your first job?
Electronic Arts.
Okay, so you worked
Vancouver.
at EA.
Yeah, I did. It was really a really lucky break, a really lucky shot. I knew some people there, and it's really hard to explain how badly I wanted to be in the games industry. I was ready to, I'm not joking, I said like, hey, I'll live in a garage if I have to. I'll do whatever I have to do to get out of the web industry and be in the games industry. So EA is who gave me my shot.
Why did you want to be in the games industry so bad? Were you playing a lot of games?
I've always played a lot of games. So how do I describe this? Ever since, when you're a kid, you love playing games, right? I love playing imagination games. But I think that was something that was different for me, was that as I started to become a tween, like around 13, nobody plays imagination games anymore. It's not cool. You can't run around and pretend that you're fighting for the alliance with your friends anymore, because that looks weird. And I still had some friends who would play those games with me past the point that it was acceptable, but I knew that was going away. So for me, that I just didn't know what I was going to do with myself. Like, I can't sit Indian style on the floor and like read teen magazines with my friends. It was really boring. So I started to write a lot so I could be in an imaginary world. I already played video games. I started playing more video games and started playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. That was like a way I could transition and still look relatively adult, teenager, becoming adult, without running around in the backyard pretending I was like a druid priestess with my best friend.
Sure.
Which did happen.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. So then, what were some of the games that you really enjoyed as you were getting more and more into them? Right, like for me, World of Warcraft is like a very formative example of that, or even like StarCraft Brood War. But for you, what were some of the games that you enjoyed early on?
Well, I was playing, I mean, the earliest games, I was on Atari 2600, so I was playing a lot of like Mega Mania. I played on Intellivision. And by the way, weirdly, almost all of I associate video games with girls because it was all of my girlfriends that had consoles.
Oh, really?
The boys we all played, I played with both groups, and all the boys we played outside, a lot of physical games. But the girls that I played with, we always played on console. So I played a lot of Donkey Kong and Frogger, and then we'd go to the arcade. I loved Gauntlet, although I'm left-handed, by the way. It's impossible to play games in the arcade when you're lefty because you're like Gauntlet was near impossible. But so those were the games that I first really got me into gaming. But I think probably if there was a game that was like one of the most pivotal moments for me was EverQuest, because that was the moment where I realized like, hey, I can still play this crazy imagination game where I feel like I'm running around with people pretending to be something else than what I am, because that is what I missed from playing those games when I was a kid. Like I actually don't really want to grow up.
Yeah.
Ever. So EverQuest to me was, I don't know how much of my life I lost to EverQuest. I had a bunch of friends that played it with me, and that was huge. Like playing in this world with all these people and creating my own character and stories, and it was great.
So fast forward, you end up at EA. What did you end up doing at EA? What projects did you work on?
First game was a game called Marvel Nemesis. It was a fighting game. So it was a Marvel fighting game. So that was the first thing that I worked on, and then I worked on NBA Street Homecourt, which was was a basketball game. I didn't know very much about basketball. I had to spend a lot of time watching movies like Hoop Dreams, reading books to try to understand better the basketball culture.
Was that hard for you because you got into the games industry? You're probably thinking you're going to help design like immersive worlds where people can be druid priestesses and all that. But
Yeah.
but instead, suddenly you're figuring out how to do the art for a basketball. Was there any ever moments where you're like, maybe the video game industry isn't going to work out for me?
No, I never had that moment. Okay, let me say this. I think that you can often find something creative in almost anything you're doing. And NBA Street Homecourt was incredibly creative because it was all about reconnecting with your hometown and the stories that players have about their hometown and growing up playing basketball. So that was very, very beautiful to me, and I very much enjoyed that part of it. And it wasn't quite the same as an imagination world, but there were still stories. And I think the stories is what made it compelling for me.
Where'd you go after EA?
After EA, I went to a small startup company that was sort of like a third party to Ubisoft. And that's how I ended up at Ubisoft Montreal. So I was just there for a short time, and then I immediately went to UB Montreal.
Okay. So what did you work on at Ubisoft?
I worked on Assassin's Creed 2, and I worked on Far Cry 3.
What were those projects like? I in particular, we were talking a little bit beforehand. Like I really have enjoyed Assassin's Creed in the past, and it must be kind of interesting for you to kind of merge like the technological feel with sort of that aesthetic of the history from that time.
Yes, I loved working on Assassin's Creed 2. It was such a fun game, and one of the most incredible teams I think in the industry at that time. The velocity on that team was crazy, but yeah, that was a huge creative challenge because the Renaissance is such an interesting time period, but it's hard to realize it in a video game without it looking a little silly. There's a lot of lace, a lot of very fancy outfits, and it was to try to put the Animus in that setting was not the easiest thing. I ended up creating a whole bunch of, style guides and rules for the Animus, and it would be things like, hey, Ezio can wear lace, but the Animus can't. because people were having a hard time figuring out how do we make this technology merge with a Renaissance setting. And the way we did it in the end was mostly through our color palettes, which, we went with these sort of like rich reds and still with the Animus and Assassin's whites. So we mostly used color, but we always let the Animus look sleek and technological and just allow it to be a sharp contrast to the historical elements in the game.
Yeah. So how'd you make the jump to Riot? Because you moved across a continent to get here. So what was that transition? Why did you decide to come here?
I've always been more of a PC gamer, and there was that whole time when they're like, PC games are dying, they're going to be dead, and I didn't feel that way. I was playing also a lot of World of Warcraft. I raided for years, and I was almost always on PC. I love Ubisoft. Ubisoft, everybody there is very a very console gaming community, and being more on the PC side, I'm just naturally more interested in PC games. I had a friend at work that introduced me to League of Legends. His name is Corey. He was playing a ton of League of Legends. So I was just at one of those points in your career where I had shipped some games I was very satisfied with, and I was starting to think about, do I want to ship another game like that, another console game, or do I want to do something completely different? And what interested me about Riot was working on a MOBA, was the League of Legends franchise, which was at that time very intriguing because it was everything, and the idea of working on a game that's continuously shipping, which I had never done. Everything for me was based on one deadline, one box product. So all of those challenges were fascinating, and I knew too that they were doing a lot of work building their IP or figuring what direction they wanted to take it. So all of that was inspiring. So I talked to Riot, and then I decided I wanted to move here.
So you landed at Riot. How long ago did you join the company?
5.5 years.
5.5 years.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, you've probably grown into this role as head of art.
Yeah.
So what was your first role?
My first role was the head of the discipline of visual design. So
that's very wordy.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. So visual design is like, think about it's graphic design. So it's all of the in-game menus, HUD, branding, a lot of the 2D. So that is, back in the day, the art department was divided all by sub-disciplines. So imagine like animation and character, environment, and VFX, and each one of those had their own discipline lead. So I came in a role like that. So I was in that role for, I guess, over 2 years. And then I transitioned to the art director of League of Legends role. It's going to be 3 years in September.
Okay. And then head of art is more recent.
It's like a month.
Okay. Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
So what have been some of the unique challenges that you have faced at Riot? Because still kind of a younger company, growing, I know the sort of the cliche that I've heard a million times is like building the plane while it's in the air. What has sort of been the unique experiences that you've had here and some of the unique challenges?
The continuous shipping, the thing that brought me here, that has been a unique experience and a unique challenge. What's great about it is that you are always shipping, and if you make a mistake, you can update it in 2 weeks. There's all these things that, like these sort of opportunities for you to fix things or add things or do whatever you want to the game. The challenge is that sometimes you don't have a real sense of completion, where there's that final push where everybody comes together on a console game and you have to make a whole bunch of decisions that can't be undone, and you have to live with it and all of your mistakes together as a team and ship that thing. It brings people together in a very unique way, and it can be hard to capture that on League because all the different teams, all the different feature teams are shipping all the time. And I'm not saying people don't come together to ship something, but there isn't that moment of pause where everyone's like, there's nothing we can do now. It's out there. Let's go on vacation.
Yeah.
And let's I need to walk away from this game for a few months and get some perspective on what just happened. And often it's several months that you get that perspective before you have to jump back in. So it's challenging here because you often don't get that moment because you just are constantly rolling on to the next thing. So you have to make those spaces for yourself. Otherwise, it's very hard to have perspective on your work.
There must be some things though, like when you release a champion, you're not going to do like maybe a couple years later you'll do like a visual upgrade or change or something to it, but like I don't see too many changes to champions after they hit, or maybe there are changes and they're subtle and I'm missing them, but it, or even like a map rework, like those feel like the culmination of months and months worth of work, and then they're out there, they don't change that much, do they?
No, no, they don't. They don't change a lot once we ship those, but it's still. I do think that team, it's like a smaller feature team, probably has that feeling of, yeah, we got that thing done. But even when a champion ships, the people that were probably involved in making that champion have already rolled off to work on something else.
Okay, so it's kind of like this like endless
Yes.
grind is maybe a
I wouldn't call it a grind, but because when people are finishing up a champ, they're excited to go and start concepting a brand new champ, right? They're back on the white canvas. It's all really exciting. But it is like you just keep rolling. So having that moment of just everyone, whether you should be or not, just like, we've got to get this thing out, and then break, like total break perspective, and then back to making something. We just miss that. We just miss that. And I know for me, it's something that I do miss. So whenever we have those moments, like we had that moment with Runes Reforged when we shipped the new runes, the runes rework for League, that was one of the few times that I felt like everybody on the team was very affected by something we were shipping, and everyone had to pull together to get it out the door, or a larger group of people had to come together to get it out the door.
yeah. Have there been moments where you feel like a sense of defeat, or some moment where there was some misstep that you really disappointed you, or just a frustration
At Riot or anywhere.
at Riot in particular?
Yeah, yeah. They happen pretty often because we are not top down. Like we're allowed, we go and make decisions every day. So there's a lot of things, but I would say if you had to make me pick one, like the one that haunts me is probably the League client update, and how some of the things worked out in League client update, where we there's a way that I believe that games should just be made, and that is, I believe that particularly the engineers and the artists and designers should be working on things at the same time and essentially checking things into the build, right?
Yeah.
And looking at it together. And I don't think artists should be polishing PSDs without just starting to put just whatever they have into the build so people can feel it. And on LCU, we were not able to work like that for a lot of reasons, and it definitely affected the team and the morale of the team. And I have a lot of regrets there because I always feel like there's probably more that I could have done to support the artists as far as how that team was working.
Yeah, just a situation where the project like didn't work out the way that you had hoped, from like a management perspective almost.
Management, but the results also in the results, because there was a lot of work that was ended up left on the cutting room floor. Like
Yeah.
and mostly it was just because of the way that we were working. If we were checking in artwork at the same time as we were like with the engineers and playing it with them and talking about it, I think we wouldn't have wasted so much work, and we would have found a lot of problems earlier on. And I was on that team for a long time, and when my role increased, I kind of pulled myself off the team. And by the way, the people that were on the team were great. I feel a lot of regrets for how the last months went down there. I feel like I could have helped.
Yeah. Conversely, what are the moments in which you feel, because you said it is a struggle sometimes because you don't always feel a sense of completion, but when do you feel that moment of success? Like, what allows you to really feel like you've done what you wanted to do?
I think that, again, I'm going to bring up the runes work, the rework of runes. I think that was a really big moment for the team. It was just one of those moments where I feel like everybody pulled together to do something that felt extremely risky, like very, very risky. And if we missed our window, we weren't going to get to ship it for like another year. So it's one of those times that we had a real deadline. It felt like a scary deadline, and we knew if we screwed it up, it would screw up the game, and players would be, burning effigies of us if we screwed something like that up. So there was real pressure on all of us to get it right. So that was, I think, one of the most satisfying things. That just happened recently, so it's quite fresh in my mind. But we had many debates on the team about the direction of that, and like some super heated debates where people went home kind of mad at each other and frustrated with each other. But when it went out and we saw how players responded to it, it felt very good. You know, there was a lot of people walking by each other's desks being like, thank you, and it was great working with you, and like this moment of like, we did it. And the team that worked on that, they did a fantastic job. So that is probably one of the moments that I was the most proud of being on League.
It's very interesting to me that that's the one that you choose. I was talking to Nathan Blau before, and he also referenced
did he?
Runes Reforged as like a really
Okay.
big moment for
Yeah.
him and something he was particularly proud of. But I think for a lot of people, they would expect, you know, you sit down with somebody who's the head of art and they'd say, oh, this big cinematic, or like this champion in particular, or this one thing. Like you're literally talking about something which impacts everyone playing the game, right?
Yeah.
But it's almost more of like a UI thing, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a an incline experience. I think a lot of people would say, well, that's not nearly as sexy as like some big cinematic or some crazy champion reveal. But
Yeah.
that's something that really sticks with you.
It does, because I think the thing about making video game art is that it's really about exposing the game design first and foremost. And then, of course, immersion, right? You want to have people feel immersed in the game, and art is a big part of that, art and audio. But the best game art is art that is, in some way or another, serving up gameplay mechanics and gameplay concepts in a way that you understand. Like, okay, this champion is a brute, or I'm supposed to click on this thing now, or I'm supposed to make these types of choices. So I'm proud of that work because it was a real combination to me of design and art and engineering, all the different disciplines coming together to make this thing that affects every single game, no matter what champion you play, which is why it's such high stakes.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I'm very proud of that.
You and your team make decisions that impact the way that fans interact with your game. Like every day there's this new fan art that comes out. There are cosplays that are really like the incarnation of decisions you guys have made. What is that experience like for you? Is there ever a moment where you get kind of a big ego because you're like, look at all those people dressed up as characters that I helped make? You know, like it must be interesting, right? That so many people in different parts of the world are interacting and inspired by the art that your team is making.
You know, I really mean this. I think the whole team feels humbled and flattered. It's not, hey, look at these people dressing up like our champions. It's often the opposite, and it is not uncommon to see great cosplay go around on Slack channels, and people are like, look at this is amazing, or I went to a show, and look at this person, and look at look at this great like fan art. We have fan art hanging on the walls. There's a lot of fan art that we find incredibly inspiring, especially because we don't always have time to just do story pieces about our champions and illustrations, but our players do. And sometimes they'll end up fleshing out some like relationships and story backgrounds that we just don't necessarily have time to do it in a way that's charming and beautiful. So I think that for the team, there's just a lot of appreciation. And for me too, I absolutely love like when Zoe came out, because that was a big deal for us, because Zoe was quite a controversial champion. And because if you asked me my number 2, it probably would have been Zoe as far as things that I'm proud of. But that was a very controversial champion. And the moment we announced her, there was fan art like the end of the first day. And the whole team was sending it around, and they were so happy because there was always questions about if we had taken her too far. So seeing the players respond to her like that was actually a huge boost to our confidence.
Why was Zoe such a controversial champion? I've heard this sort of hinted at elsewhere, but it's interesting to me because I feel like Zoe came out with such universal acclaim that it's interesting to me that behind the scenes there was like conversation about sort of the art or at least the character of Zoe.
Yeah, the thematics. Yeah, for sure. So Zoe is a champion I am really proud of too. But Zoe she's a cute, bubbly little girl, and right from the beginning, that's what the team wanted her to be. They felt that we were missing that in the mid lane. We needed to have like somebody that was Lux-like, and they said we need somebody that's just bubbly, and some people just want to play a champion that's having a good time. And I think that she ended up being very colorful and extremely playful, maybe even more so than we originally thought of. We kind of were thinking of her as this cosmic child. And then slowly she became like more and more bubbly and funny and almost taunting other champions in lane. And I think that some people felt we'd gone a little bit too far. Maybe she didn't belong in the world. Like she was a little bit too cute and too colorful and too bubbly. So yeah, there was controversy around her internally, and certainly. And by the way, I go around and ask other rioters, like, what do you think? Do you think she belongs in the game? And some people I trust a lot were like, I don't think she fits. She doesn't seem like she fits to me. Like you guys have taken it too far. And we did have players give us the same feedback when we first started to reveal Zoe, that maybe she was just like, had we lost our minds? But I am very proud of her because I do think now she is absolutely accepted. And when we look at like how players have responded to her worldwide, it's been overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah. Do you do a little victory lap whenever that happens? Sort of, you guys weren't sure about this, but it worked out okay.
Yeah, actually we did. I'm not ashamed to say that. We were really proud when we saw the response from players because it was even more positive. We hoped it was going to be positive, but it was even more positive than we thought it was going to be.
What would you say, like, what is the thing that you think people should know about Riot as a company now that you've been here for so long? Everybody has their opinions, outward ideas about it, but like what is unique about Riot, or what really stands out? What do you think people should know?
I think that truly we are all gamers. That is really the thing. That's something I love about being here. I really mean that. I love it so much. Everybody here plays games, and I mean all types of games. We play video games, we play board games, we play D&D. We all still play all these games. And I do think that it affects how we think about making games because we all appreciate games so much. So I've worked with a lot of developers that make beautiful games that aren't necessarily playing them. And I think it is a different type of culture when everybody's playing them all the time. It's like something that you can bond with all of your coworkers, but also I hope it's something that gives players trust in us because, and by the way, I'm not trying to say that just because you play games, you're great at making them, but if you play them, you care about the experience of a player. So when you're making decisions, you do think about how it's going to affect the person playing the game. There's a lot of games that I play that I get super frustrated playing because I play all the time and I think to myself, I'm never going to do this to players if I ever make a game. And I think a lot of writers think the same way.
Maybe more than any other, like I meet people who want to make design. I meet people who want to work in esports or whatever. I meet endless amount of people who want to be artists on video games. They love the idea of helping to create characters or splash art or any of this stuff. They really like. There are so many passionate up and coming artists who really want to work at a video game company, and a lot of these people really want to know like what is the pathway, like what are the steps, how do you get in? Are there courses you should take? Is there and I'm sure you get this question a ton, but what do you think, for the people who do want to work in an art department at a video game company, or even specifically at Riot, what should those people be doing?
So if you don't have any formal training, I think that getting some formal training would be helpful. And when I say that, I mean I wouldn't recommend necessarily a game art school. I think people just need to learn foundations, and that's just like color theory, just basic drawing skills. That's normally what I recommend. Is don't worry about going to a game school. Just worry about learning your foundation skills, and then play a lot of games, and then make your own game art. And that's it. I mean, the way you get into the industry is by making the thing, like figuring out how to solve those problems. So I think when somebody wants to be a game artist, though, the most important thing that they have to understand is that this isn't just, we're not just painting. We're not just making any characters that we want. You have to be a designer. You have to love design. And you have to love the constraints that design introduces into your art and solving those types of problems. So being a great problem solver. If you just want to make your own art, it's going to be hard to be in the games industry because you're going to make art that isn't going to help people understand what they need to do in the game. They're not going to understand the type of character that they're playing or the kind of character that they're facing if it's an enemy. So you have to absolutely love those types of constraints and love having, like, thinking in a more, I guess, like having a design state of mind when you're creating art. So that's would be my recommendations.
Yeah. Hey, final question here, because you are newly minted as the head of art for all of Riot Games. Where do you want to take the company from an artistic perspective in the next couple of years? Like, what would you like to see? What would you like to build out? Obviously, there are unannounced projects I'm sure you can't talk about, but ultimately, like, I'm sure you have high-level goals or aspirations for the company from just an art perspective.
That's going to be a hard question for me to answer.
Sure.
It's like we have a bunch of products we want to ship, and it's like, what is the shape of the art department? What is the shape of the talent that we need to have in-house to be able to deliver on those products and our future direction? And because I can't talk to you about that in depth, it's hard for me to explain the like ultimately where that's going. But I can say some things is that we're not gonna sacrifice quality, and we're always going to put resonance above everything else. And that's part of quality to us. Resonance meaning that we're always going to make things that resonate with the players. We're never going to be an art department that's just off painting something because we think it's beautiful. We're never going to change that about ourselves. We're always going to be people who are like, hey, we love this kind of game. These are who the players are for this type of game. What is the kind of artwork? What is the type of like immersion that we need to create here that's going to excite our players? So that won't ever change. But the rest of it, I have to tell you, is a little TBD.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to find out. Yeah. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.